The story really begins in 1969, when my 22-year-old cousin was diagnosed with cancer. They did an operation, and then afterwards I believe they gave him chemo, and he dropped from 200 pounds down to 120 pounds. Then 3 years later, in 1972, well, actually the doctors had said at the time they thought they got it all. But 3 years later, in 1972, he came home on vacation, and we were talking one day, and he collapsed right in front of me. And I suspected it was probably the cancer back, but I was hoping it wasn't. And of course he went back to Ontario, and as soon as he went in and seen the doctors, they just said you've got 3 to 6 months to live. So he came back to Spring Hill, and within 3 months he was dead. And I watched him grade down to about 55 pounds. It was just horrible. My cousin was more like a brother to me. We grew up together in the country. We knew each other intimately. So it really affected me quite badly. And then about 3 years later, I was leaving work one day. I worked at All Saints Hospital in Spring Hill. And I just got in the car and I turned on the radio, and the local radio station in Amherst, CKDH, they were reading a report on the radio station about the THC, the active ingredient in marijuana, killing cancer cells. And of course the announcer was laughing like a fool when he was making these statements. So I didn't know whether to take it seriously or not. But, you know, time went on and I never heard nothing more about THC killing cancer cells or anything, so I thought it was just some type of hoax. In 1997, I had a severe head injury at work. I wound up with what they call post-concussion syndrome. My head rings 24 hours a day. And that in turn, that brings your blood pressure up. I had a lot of balance issues from the injury and things like that. So, I mean, I went through the medical system. I took their pills for 5 years. I took every chemical they threw at me. But they did nothing but make me worse. And then in 1998, about a year after I was injured, I seen an episode of The Nature of Things with Dr. David Suzuki called Reefer Madness 2. And it showed all these people on there smoking pot for their medical problems, and they were being helped. I was, you know, quite desperate, so I went out and I got some pot from friends nearby, and I smoked it, and it did more for me than anything the doctors were giving me. So I went back to the doctors. Every doctor I seen, I asked them for prescriptions for hemp, but not one doctor would give me a prescription. Then in 1999, I was in my doctor's office, and when I was talking to him, of course, I was always asking for a prescription, and again, he refused me. But I asked the doctor that day when I was in there, I said, you know, what would you think if as opposed to smoking the plant material, what would you think if I made the essential oil of the plant and ingested it? And the doctor said that that would be a much more medicinal way to use the substance, but he still wouldn't give me a prescription. Now this is all grown in now. You can see up here, this was all plants. Then in 2001, they called me into his office. They told me that they had given me everything that they had to offer, and nothing was helping me, so I was on my own. And again, I asked the doctor for a prescription for hemp. Again, I was refused. And I mean, the doctor knew that this was the only thing that was helping me. And he also knew that if I was caught with hemp, that I would be charged as a criminal, because he didn't give me a prescription. So, you know, I was kind of left between the devil and the deep blue sea. I mean, what am I supposed to do? I think it pretty well has to break open this year, because there's so much happening, you know, in all these other countries. There's nothing going to happen here unless it's forced. Now, I didn't know anything about what the oil would do. I was very afraid of this substance in the beginning. You know, I mean, I knew smoking pot wasn't harmful, but this oil is really it's a concentrate, you know, and it's a very powerful concentrate. I, you know, started taking the oil on a steady basis, and I started getting more sleep. See, like with the condition I have, the ringing in the head 24 hours, it stops you from sleeping. And all the pills they gave me, they never gave me one pill that would put me to sleep. So the oil really was working miracles for me in that way. And what happened, I started losing all this weight. And it was scary in the beginning, because I thought, you know, like it was hurting me. But my weight dropped from about 185, 190 down to 160, and then it just leveled off. And My arthritis in my knees, that disappeared. Like in 2002, I went to see the doctor about the skin cancer I had. I had 3 areas. I had one here in my cheek, and one on my chest, and one right there by my eye. And I had these things since the 1990s, and I always suspected that they were probably skin cancer. So when the doctor looked at them, and he told me, he said, I can't be sure until I get the pathology report back. But he said it does look like skin cancer. And they were really concerned with that one next to my eye. So, you know, because the proximity to the eye could cause a lot of problems. So they scheduled me to go in and have that one removed first, and then I was to go in at a later date and have the other 2 removed. So I went in, I think it was around the end of January 2003, and they operated right here on the eye. And it was about a week after the operation. I was sitting home, and I got this magnified mirror, and I was looking at, you know, where they had done the operation. And of course, it was infected. I was sitting there looking at the area where they had operated, and that's when that report I'd heard on the radio popped back into my head about THC, you know, killing cancer cells. Mm-hmm. And I'd heard that back in the 70s. Well, by that time, I'd been taking the oil for about a year, you know, and it helped me in many ways. Like my thinking processes had cleared up. You know, I was pretty well back to normal. But I really didn't think, you know, where I'd been taking the oil for so long, I thought, well, if THC killed cancer, well, why didn't it cure my cancer? Well, you know, why do I still have this? And I hate to say it, but I almost didn't do it. I almost didn't apply the oil. I thought, you know, if the medical system, if there was a cure for cancer, surely the medical system would be using it. That was my assumption at the time. I had the oil right there anyway because I was ingesting it to help me sleep. So I just took a little bit of oil and I put a little bit on bandages, 2 bandages, and I put one on the cheek and one on my chest. I never felt a thing. You know, before that I was getting these sensations like I had splinters in my face. And as soon as I put the oil on, that sensation went away. But there was no feeling that anything was happening. So 4 days later, I left the bandages in place for 4 days, and then I went down to the bathroom, and when I took the bandages off, I was just shocked because it was all healed. It was just pink skin on both places. And of course, then I started telling my friends, you know, like I cured my cancer with marijuana or oil made from the cannabis hemp plant. And people just laughed at me. You know, like, you're crazy. After a few weeks of people laughing at me, they turned this one that they had surgically removed, it came right back. And I watched it develop, and that same swelling and the bleeding and the splinter feeling in the face. So I just put a little dab of oil in a bandage, put it on there, left it on for 4 days. When I removed it, it was all healed, just pink skin. Now this is 2012. That was back in 2003 when I did, early 2003 when I did this. I've never retreated these spots. So once I seen this one heal up, then I went down to my doctor's office because they had taken a sample when they done the operation. So I went down to get the pathology report. When I went in, I asked the doctor's, well, it was his wife. She was the receptionist, the doctor's wife. So I asked her for a copy of the report, and I looked at it, and it said right on the report, basal cell carcinoma. That's skin cancer. So I told her that day, I said that, you know, that cancer had returned. And so I explained to her that I had cured that cancer and the other 2 using hemp oil. And the minute I said hemp oil, the woman just went ballistic. I mean, I was in my doctor's waiting room. There was 5 or 6 other patients there. And as soon as I said hemp oil, you could just see her, like she hunched. She went like that. And the doctor will not go there. The doctor will not prescribe this. You know, and she was doing it very loudly. As a matter of fact, I for a little while there, I thought the woman was some kind of a nutcase. So I got in my truck that day, and on the way home, it was a really strange feeling, trying to figure, you know, what are these people doing? I mean, if I was a doctor and a patient of mine came in and said that they had cured their cancer, I would be interested in it. But this doctor and his wife had no interest in it. So it smelled kind of fishy to me. So I didn't really know what to do at that point. You know, I had no choice. I had to stay on the oil because it's the only medication that worked for me. And right after I visited my doctor's office, I went down and seen my mother, and she had weeping psoriasis on her foot and lower leg. And so we used the oil to heal that. I started supplying oil, you know, like to different people I knew with skin conditions. I started offering the oil to people I knew. And it was working on everything. And then more people, like their friends, would come. So it was building and building all the time. I started a campaign in 2003 to alert the government. I mean, I went to all the political parties. I went to the Cancer Society. We even went to the United Nations. We went everywhere about this. You know, nobody would lift a finger.
How long did it take to plant all that?
Oh, we worked 2 or 3 days. You know, actually longer than that, because I built up some of the beds, you know, raised them up a bit so the plants would grow better. But there was a lot of work went into it, and some of my patients come over and they helped me plant it. So I didn't do it just alone, but it was quite an effort, more like a community effort than anything else.
Right. Wow, that's pretty incredible.
Well, when the patients seen what the medicine would do, they backed it. In 2005, I came in contact with Rick Dwyer over here at the Legion in McCann. I had treated a lady with cancer, and she had told Rick about, you know, how she was cancer-free and what had cured her. So Rick Dwyer wanted to meet me, so when I went over, Rick and I, we had a good talk. And then he went with me, because at that time I was actually treating people in their homes. So when Rick Dwyer seen what the oil was doing himself, and he knew some of the patients also, so when Rick seen it himself, we decided that, that the Legion should do something about this. So Rick got in touch with George Coyne at Maritime Command in Halifax, and he told him about this. As a matter of fact, he contacted them, I believe, 3 times, to do something about this. Because all the membership of the Branch 134 over here in McCann, they were behind this. Even the executive, they had put a letter out in the paper that, we wanted to do an honest and open review of this medicine. And we invited the police, the doctors, the Cumberland Health Authority, all of them, come to the meeting. And I was going to bring patients. But that, of course, that never happened. You have to watch yourself because some of this is built up here and there from where I was planting.
So how long, it's been almost 2 years, since you've been here?
2009 was the last crop that was, there was only about 150 plants in 2009 in the backyard. Once I put 250 in, but I had to take out the males, so that only left about 150. Right. And before that, like I said, 2006 there was 1,100, 2005 there was 1,600, and then in 2003 I think it was about 135 down by the river, down off my land, but it was down by the river. And that's the year they did the first raid. I never hid anything. I openly stated right in the video that we shot in 2005 that I was going to grow the plants right in my backyard. I made no secret of it, and I told everyone what it was for. It was for medicinal use for whoever needed it. I put 1,620 plants in my backyard in 2005. I sent the RCMP a videotape. May 6, 2005. I took the videotape in. As a matter of fact, Rick Dwyer came with me and videoed me giving it to the RCMP because I didn't want them saying that they never received it. And I also gave them some paperwork asking that local politicians be charged with criminal negligence causing death. So 3 months later, on August 3rd, 2005, the police came in and raided me. I really thought that, the government would take an interest, and within a matter of 6 months, I figured this medicine would be becoming available. But instead, they did just the opposite. They persecuted me, and it was just horrifying when I realized, what they were all about. Oh, they put on quite a show here, One of them actually stayed here on the deck with me. A female officer stayed here on the deck with me while her fellow officers were down there cutting the cannabis down. And she told me right there on the deck that day, she said, "I believe everything you're saying." And I just looked at her and I said, this cures cancer. I said, what are you doing? Where are your morals? Your friends are down there cutting down the cure for cancer, for God's sakes. What's wrong with you people? And then she just clammed up. She wouldn't talk anymore.
How many treatments did you lose? Do you figure?
Oh, well, if you just take the numbers alone, when you look at the 1,620 plants in 2005, another 1,100 plants in 2006, well, you're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of treatments, that people didn't get. And I was giving it away for nothing.
And people were waiting for that? Did you?
Oh, yes. A lot of people were waiting. In 2006, when the RCMP came in again and did the second raid, or third raid, then actually the community was outraged. You know, that's when we decided to call a meeting and invite, you know, the health authority, everyone in, the police, the doctors, all of them. Bring them in. Here's the patients. Now let's have an open conversation about this. But the day that was to take place, the Royal Canadian Legion's Maritime Command, with the aid of the RCMP, they came in and they shut our local Legion branch down. So it just blew my mind. You know, when you look at the Legion's own handbook, it says, you know, they are to represent the interests of veterans and their families. You know, so they should have done something about this. But instead, they got right in bed with the government and went along with shutting the Legion down and everything. And that's the reason I've stated that, as far as I'm concerned, the Royal Canadian Legion is a total fraud. It should be disbanded. And the same goes for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, because there's only one word for them, and that's pathetic. I know we need police, but we need policemen that you can respect. I have no respect for these people. Anybody that's out there raiding medicinal users and taking their medicine, how can you respect them?
In McCann, Nova Scotia, this oil is gaining a reputation as a miracle drug.
That's the cure right there.
Oil extracted from marijuana plants. Rick Simpson has been making it and giving it to friends and neighbors. He calls it hemp oil. Others know it as weed oil. In small doses, he says, it makes you well without getting you high.
Well, you can't deny your own eyes, can you? Now, here's somebody dying from cancer, they're not dying anymore. Here's somebody that had something else, well, they're cured. And this is what's doing it.
The McCann branch of the Royal Canadian Legion was impressed too. So impressed, it hosted meetings like this one, aimed at spreading the word about hemp oil. But when they planned a big public meeting, higher-ups at the Legion shut them down.
The provincial command came here the day of the meeting, and they come in and they lock the doors, and then I come into the yard, and I had two RCMP officers here that told me I was not allowed on the property.
They are using the Royal Canadian Legion, its name, its insignias, and the buildings as a platform to promote the use of hemp oil as a medicinal drug.
I don't care if this medicine comes from a tomato plant, a potato plant, or a hemp plant. If the medicine's safe and helps and works, why not use it?
For Rick Dwyer, it's an emotional issue. One of the testaments to hemp oil's healing power is his father, a military veteran suffering from lung cancer.
And this last time I was in, I didn't know it, but they said I was going to die in 24 hours, but I didn't. So I took the oil and everything worked out right.
But the Legion isn't budging. They've suspended the entire executive of this branch, along with any activities planned for the building, until they install a new management team.
There is no provincial or federal regulation which states that this marijuana can be grown and produced into hemp oil for medicinal purposes. And therefore, it's illegal as far as the province is concerned. And the Royal Canadian Legion does not back illegal operations.
Simpson has had trouble with the law. The RCMP confiscated 1,600 marijuana plants from his backyard last year. Plants he claims were grown for medicinal purposes. A court case is unresolved, and so are questions within the Legion about whether hemp oil is medicine or menace.
That goes against the general bylaws of the Royal Canadian Legion.
What I did, I'm proud of what I did. I'm proud of it.
And for now, since the Legion is the town's only meeting place, getting the word out about hemp oil will prove to be more difficult. In McCann, Nova Scotia, this is Global National's Ross Lord reporting.
And so I just kind of said to the executive there, you know, like, come on now, guys, for God's sakes, you know, if this is all true, which it appears to be, you know, how many Canadians are, you know, suffering here with these problems? It amazed me, is like I said to my family doctor, I said, look, I'm no doctor, but I'm not blind. I can see cancer on somebody's face disappearing. You don't have to be a doctor to see that and say, hey, was it this oil that cured that up? And then he'd put the oil on somebody else's cancer and it would do the same? Well, you gotta start thinking, well, it was either that oil that cured it up or this man's got some kind of godlike powers that heal these people up. You know, and basically I said, no, it's the oil. It's the oil doing this.
It wasn't unusual to see, 4, 5, 6 cars in my yard. That was quite normal for around here. I had a very large clientele.
Yeah.
It's like I said, it wasn't about the money. I mean, if I had the medicine and if I could grow the plants and produce the medicine, I was giving it away. But the demand got so great, and with the police, taking my crops, the only other thing you could do then was to go out and buy the material needed from local growers. So a lot of the time, I acted more like the middleman between the patients and the growers.
Okay.
I was arrested. I was charged with trafficking, possession, and cultivation. I had to cultivate the medicine or the plants to make the medicine. And to give it to people, I had to possess the medicine. And as for trafficking, well, if you look at the dictionary definition of trafficking, it says the exchange of goods for monetary gain. I didn't gain anything. So it really wasn't trafficking. I mean, I was giving the medicine away. But of course, the legal system, they have a different definition for trafficking. So this all went on. I mean, I started then down the road through the court, through the legal system in Canada. And that's a horrifying experience, believe me.